Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Megaman Battle Network Operate Star Force. In the last week we continued on our post-game grind, getting Pharaohman out of the way in the process, alongside completing, more or less, maybe barring a few chips, the left side of the Undernet pathway, and now we're in Undernet 11. Because not only are there a couple of battleships we haven't gotten here, period, but now that we're in the post-game, we can now access another new boss fight. With that said, I should note, this particular boss fight will only spawn if you've collected, I believe, at least 140 out of the game's battleships. So make sure you have that, because otherwise you're not doing this. Also, make sure you grab whatever Zenny you can along the way, because again, the shop here has easily the most expensive stuff in the game, namely that one last power-up, so save up. With that said, we want to come over here to this dead end and accidentally encounter a Mosquito 3 in the process. This is our first new enemy for the part. 200 HP, 200 damage. They give you the Drain 3 chip, which drops between ranks 5 on. I should note, the main difference between them and the Mosquito 1 and 2s, they move extremely slowly. At the end of this pathway, though, lies Shadowman. Easily one of the more tricky boss fights in the game, as his whole thing is he can make shadow clones that will just absorb a blow for him, and they'll also attack whenever he attacks. As for his attacks, he can fly up in the air and fling shurikens down at you that will track onto you for about 3 or so panels. He can send an explosion down the entire row he's on, and by the way, I should note, whenever he attacks, so do his shadow clones. And I might be thinking of one of the later games when it comes to this. I believe if you're close enough to some of his shadow clones, they can just use a sword battleship on you, more or less. I say I believe because I might be thinking of one of his appearances in one of the later games, because he is one of those navies that shows up more than once. In fact, he's one of the more commonly reoccurring ones in the series. And if I am, that's my bad. I genuinely cannot remember, because sometimes it's hard to tell which version of the fight's able to do what. With that said, relatively straightforward boss, and for beating him like we do with Pharaohman, we're going to get his battle chip, which actually got nerfed for OSS. What his battleship is, he flies up in the air and throws 3 shurikens. Each one can hit the same enemy. They did 80 damage on the base chip in Battle Network 1, but here in OSS/OSF, it does 60. Not bad, but noticeably nerfed, and the S-code got a little bit nerfed to do that alone, honestly, because Shadowman 3 was pretty good. With that, now that we've beaten him, his V2 form is now randomly an encounter you can find around here in Undernet 11, though you might need to leave the area first, maybe? I'm not sure if that's the case with Pharaohman 2, on that note. With that said, time for the Nightmare chip. This is a Popper 2. 120 HP, 180 damage, they do the usual pop-down, do a wood tower, but they are responsible for the drop-down battle chip, which makes you invisible when you're not attacking. In the original game, this would only drop at ranks 9, 10, and S. Here in Operate Star Force, it drops at rank 7 through S, making it enormously easier to get. You basically had to be frame perfect with one particular battle to even have a good chance of it, and that's the one where you fought one of them and like 2 Popper 3s. With that said, time for an interesting enemy. This is Rush, or Mole as he's known in the original game. It's our dog friend from Classic. 10 HP, but it'll only take 1 HP per attack. The way this fight works, it's whack-a-mole. It'll pop up alongside 2 other holes randomly across the stage. You need to test your reactions and hit it 10 times. The timing gets tighter and tighter, the further in you get. You get a good chip whenever you beat it, because you'll always get it whenever you beat the virus. But it's the process of getting it that's hell. We're going to get, I forget the name of it. Pop-up. It's the same as drop-down, more or less, but it's a little better because it lasts longer. So that was totally my first take of that virus, right? Right? Oh, you have no idea. Shit! Damn it. Damn it. Shit. What? Oh, for the love of fuck. Something happened? I kind of blacked out the past 20 minutes. Either way, By and large, pop-up and drop-down can be useful chips, but ultimately, they're the kind of defensive that is almost broken, and at this point in the game, all that would be left to use them on is further refights against Man, Shadowman, or the potential super boss if you wanted to use it on that. But even then, you want to probably use more offensive measures against that anyway. With that said, time for Shadowman v2, who is very much the same as Man, in that he has more than one drop, or more than the usual 2 drops, rather. As he not only drops the Shadowman 1 chip, he also drops Shadowman 2 at rank 7 through 10, Shadowman 3 at 8 through S, but at 8 through S, he'll also drop the Muramasa K Battleship. Muramasa's a little odd in that it's not a chip you would use if you're going for high rankings until the later games, probably. Because what it does is its damage is noted on the chip as question marks. It does damage equal to the HP that you currently have subtracted from your maximum. So if, say, you have the maximum of 1,000 HP, but you're down to 100, it'll do 900 damage, which theoretically makes it the most powerful chip in the game. And it can be in the later ones, but because Battle Network 1 doesn't reset your health between fights, it only would really come in handy probably in multiplayer, honestly. As everywhere else, there's just better things to use. You'll take too long trying to lose that much health to the point where that chip would just never be useful. It's a cool idea, and it can be useful both in program advances and otherwise in later games, again, but here in BN1, no. Shadowman 3 ain't too bad, though, if you get that. But that said, that does mean I have to fight V2 3 times, and to be frank, that's a grind. Oh, hey, there's Muramasa there. Pretty cool chip art, though. Consistently, whenever that chip shows up, it's some of my favorite chip art. Another unfortunate thing is the scenario that kind of follows through with Man and Shadowman happens kind of throughout the series. There's always going to be at least one Navi per game that has another battleship on top of their V2 and V3 chip in their third phase. Usually resolved or saved for post-game Navis, but still you're going to have to see it all the same, and it's always annoying, unfortunately. Because it makes it just that much harder to get that one chip you might really like, and not every game has the minor rate changes that this one does when it comes to getting the stuff you might want. Because by and large, chips that were known to be hard to get by the fans in Capcom in the original Battle Network 1 got minor edits in Operate Star Force to be easier to get. But there's always going to be those ones that are just hard to get. Hell, in some of the games, even the super bosses have more than one chip. Which is really annoying. But, oh well, it's part of the grind, I guess. I'm not going to complain too much about it, especially because there's only 19 battle chips left for us to get. And some of these are a bit different. While some of them are just ones we still have to get from viruses, others are gotten from minor side quests I still have yet to do. And others are just from, frankly, completely scattered viruses that just didn't drop them when I was fighting them otherwise. With that said, I am going to recommend that anytime you're doing post-game stuff, before you jack out, come over to Undernet 12, save frequently, and grab every mystery data here, because again, in order to get 100% and even fight the super boss and operate Star Force, you need, I believe, damn near every HP memory and power-up. So you're going to need to buy everything from the shops, and that includes the shop in Undernet 11, and I'm going to need well over, I think currently 100,000 Zenny in order to get everything. And admittedly, Internet 12 makes that pretty easy, but something that could help with that I'm surprised the series never did is just straight up add shops where you could sell battle chips for Zenny. I mean, I feel like that would be a pretty easy thing to do. I mean, for some cases, obviously, you'd have to make the very common chips very inexpensive. Say, like, a cannon is maybe 50 Zenny at most. But I'm surprised they just never did something like that. Or maybe have it so that you can only do that to chips over a certain rarity. Like maybe sell Navi chips and just grind those for the equivalent to Zenny to a single boss fight. Something like that. Something to help. With that said, now I need to buy some chips from Higsby. There are, I think, 2 or 3 here I need to buy. First off is Interrupt. There's also, I believe, one of the Get-Ons and Buster Sword. Buster Sword turns your Buster into a sword for a couple of turns, I think. Interrupt is a multiplayer-only chip. What that does is that in the original game, in multiplayer, it destroyed the first chip in your opponent's set that they selected. Here in Operate Star Force, it deletes the entire set. A little bit broken, but that only half matters if you're in multiplayer. And there's a couple of chips in each game that are like that, only useful in multiplayer at best. Also, I should note, throughout the post-game, I do recommend if you're getting bored pretty quick, swap over to Star Force Megaman if you're feeling like that, because it can help with the boredom angle, because it at least gives you some more gameplay variance, and admittedly, it can even help with some of the other viruses for killing them pretty quickly. Now, at this point, I'm in Mesa's fish cart computer because I need to get the wave battleship from the jellies because it didn't drop when I was fighting them in, I believe that was in the traffic light computers, maybe? Honestly, this is usually how my experiences go in the Battle Network games, especially in 1 and 2. I go so hard getting the other chips, but there's still like 1 or 2 I'm missing from earlier viruses that I just didn't grab. Later games would make this a bit easier in one regard, in that there were separate completion stars for getting everything of a standard chip, everything of a Navi chip, and then the third variety chips, which are the super chips, so to speak, called Giga Chips. But that won't start happening until BN3. As it is in this game, it's more or less just get every chip, then get every program advance, things like that. The next chip we're missing is from the TV computer, and I believe this is just the standard cloud chip. I know I haven't kind of gone over every single battle chip we've been getting along the way and what you need to do to get it, and because by and large I've talked about the viruses that drop it already anyway, and this is just me actively getting it. Again, this is what the post-game for these games is. See chip you don't have, go get. Again, later games do better with this, but BN1 really is a product of its time, because I can't think of many RPG post games from this era that were really satisfactory. Like, I guess you technically had Chrono Trigger and Cross with the various endings those had. You maybe had... what else would there even be? I guess maybe Threads of Fate with the second run, but that's more so for the rest of the story, sort of. Dragon Quest, I guess, had some post-game past this point, or was that not added until the DS version of those Super Nintendo games? I actually can't remember at the moment because I'm not actively thinking about it. Post-game, as the bottom line, post-game wasn't really a thing. Commonly, at least. Until, I want to say, maybe late 90s, early 2000s anyway? So, Capcom making their first proper RPG post-game from memory, because I don't think any of the Breath of Fires have any notable post-game until maybe the PlayStation era. It's not too surprising it's like this, plus they probably had to figure out how they'd even do a post-game for a game with this general combat style. And they get closer to what I feel games should do for post-game in the sequels. Again. But it's lackluster. There's Iron Shield, by the way. It's a shield you place down in front of you for a short time. Defensive chips are not my forte. There's actually a couple of viruses I missed in the World 3 computers, and I can technically get like 2 of them in this one, but when it comes to like the later Aura fights, the later Aura chips, I'd rather just go onto the Undernet to grab those. In particular, I'm here for the Billy 2 there, because I still have to get Thunder 2. The annoying thing as well when it comes to drop rates, and I think I've mentioned this throughout the game, I've talked about what goes into busting levels, but every time you start a battle, I believe this is how it works, at least. The game selects one virus from the set you're fighting to be the one that drops something. And that makes it annoying to get, because you might not get the right drop from it. Battle Network 3 Beyond would add a way to guarantee that you would at least get a battle chip from a battle, so you didn't have to worry about, say, getting Zenny. So that removed at least one step of the item dropping process, but it still needed some work. Actually, what am I in the traffic light computer for? I genuinely forget. Oh, right, I'm Monocule 1s. We haven't fought these yet, have we? These have... it scrolls up on my list. 60 HP, 80 damage. They dropped the Bubble Wrap 1 chip, which is the same thing as the Bubble Wrap 3, but I think it either takes less damage to pop or it doesn't stick around as long, because some defensive battle chips they fade after a time period. Others fade the moment they get hit or lose their HP count. And even then, some do both. Auras will fade after a certain time period anyway. Part of the reason why, to me, they're just not worth using, because I'd rather just use that chip slot and maybe code better with something else that could do damage and help me kill things more quickly. Although there are cases in some of the later games where they can code well with program advances in order to... Oh, actually, no, they're parts of program advances, rather. So at least those can be useful. Like, I think we mentioned, I think Barrier R is used for one in this game. They do better with it in later ones. It's basically the summary of almost every part of this game. Now, I'm back at Miyu's shop because I still need to get the first and third candle chips, and both are very easily found here in her shop. You can get candle 1 over in her hourglass, or her mirror, rather. You can get candle 3 here in the big vase. Some of these chips are ones I'm surprised I missed, because honestly, I think in my test playthroughs of every single section, because the way I recorded this game was, I played through section once, reloaded my save, and did it again that time recording. Sometimes I got the chips on the test run, but just didn't on the other one because of the luck of the draw when it came to what battle chips showed up. And also, at some points, it was just the fact that I was not at a proper level to the point where I could easily get a high busting rank. Or sometimes I was, and the game just said no, have Zenny instead. Which, you know what, I need to, but I'd rather get the chips first, come on. Really wish I had known you could skip the jack-in sequence with the start button back then. I really wish I had remembered that. Not that I would have saved you guys much time. I probably would have saved maybe 2-3 minutes across the LP in general. But with editing out, that's maybe 20 minutes for me that could have been saved, and that would have been nice. Especially for hard drive space. Hour-and-a-half long plus recording sessions of RPGs take up a lot of that, by the way. I'm going to be glad when this LP's done. That's a lot of space I can free up. That's at least like a 60 gigs that it's taking up with being compressed footage at the moment. Alright, so now we're back in Undernet 3 because I still have yet to get the drop from both the Spooky 3s and I think the Twisty 2s. No, those are in Undernet 7. Spooky 3s are the thing I'm here for, and this is where Sharkman really comes into play. Can you tell why I've said this chip is absolutely ridiculous for getting battle chips? Full row of 100 plus damage, that's an easy S rank on most virus battles. By and large, every game does have that one strategy that's really good just for clearing out viruses versus boss fights. And admittedly, that became a lot easier to do in the later games, especially because Battle Network 2 Beyond added the ability to have more than one chip holder, meaning you could have one customized specifically for boss fights and one specifically for normal battle. With that said, that's a lot of customization, and I tend to do that somewhat in the later ones, but there's a lot of the time you'll just see me just customize the same one over and over again until it's refined to a point that it'll work on, well, on more or less both. Alright, and now we have, I think, the final new enemy for the part. These are the Monocule Twos. They have 90 HP and do 120 damage, but they're still defensive viruses. They drop Bubble Wrap too. Both them and the first variant of them drop their chips between rank 7 and S, so you have to fight them well, but between their shields and the fact they're usually on the same row in my experience, it's pretty easy to take them out on one double deletion, giving you a pretty good chance of getting the chip. I genuinely wonder though, if they had done an operate whatever for the later games, would they have also altered the chip drop tables for that to make it a bit easier for some of them? Because each game, like I said, has that one chip. They probably would have, but this game sold so poorly that we never got to those. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 26, I think, we're going to continue on in Postgame, slowly whittling down that number until we show off one of the other new things that Operate Star Force added. See you guys then.